Welcome to episode 74 of the Grassroots Side podcast with me, your host, Harry Purdy. Today, I am absolutely delighted to welcome a fitness professional mentor, a fat loss coach. She has been helping people who feel like they've been dieting their whole life, Miss Emma Storey Gordon. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, first and foremost, I will be honest with you, I've followed you for a little while. The reason I wanted to get you on the podcast was just because you come across as such a genuinely lovely person and somebody that I knew would be really easy to talk to. So no pressure on that one.
I absolutely am. I just like chatting about this stuff. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to talk. And yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, no, same here. 10 to 11 years in the fitness industry is impressive. You must have learned a lot in that time. As they say, you're always learning as a coach. Where did it start for you, Emma?
Yeah, I'm old. So I guess it started like while I was at university. So I did the standard kind of like sport. So I guess I'll do sports science at university, which I did really enjoy, but maybe about halfway through that, I trained up in fact, I think it was the first year I came home standard, like go home to your parents for the summer. And I vividly remember this because now looking back, I'm like, that changed my life so much. But I applied to work in this shoe shop called Run For It, like a running shoe shop. And I didn't get the job. And I remember being really annoyed at it. And I was like, oh, and I used to run as well. So I was like, I'd be perfect for this job. And like, I thought that was a really cool job to work in a running shoe shop. But anyway, obviously very high expectations of myself. Anyway, I didn't get the job. And then I went home and my dad was like, well, you're not just staying here all summer bumming around doing nothing. And I was like, well, I can't find a job, blah, blah, blah. There was probably some other, I don't know, economical crisis at that point as well. So I was like, well, there aren't any jobs for us. Anyway, long story short, he was like, well, you're not doing nothing. So I was like, fine, I'll train to be a personal trainer. And that's what I did that summer.
Amazing.
So then I got qualified as a personal trainer. And I guess like, I'm not going to say the rest is history because the rest is like a long slog of things, failing at a lot of things, finding my way a little bit. And then, yeah, I get the whole point is like you said, you're always learning. It's always changing. My job 2 years ago looks completely different than my job does now. And I'm assuming my job in 2 years' time will look completely different. I love that. Like, I absolutely love that it's always changing, always evolving. I'm always learning something new. It means I never get bored. And yeah.
Incredible. Already, I'm at a question which I didn't have planned, which always seems to be the way with podcasts. How did Emma, the coach, look like 10 years ago as a coach to Emma now? Like, what are the differences?
Oh, huge. So 10 years ago when I started coaching, I was very much like sports science background. I was involved in sport myself. So I thought what people needed to know was what to do. So I'd be like, here's your workouts, here's your nutrition targets, see ya. Like, surely you know what to do. Like, that was the whole problem. Why aren't you getting results? And now I realize that actually knowing what to do is like 1% of the equation. It's actually helping people implement that and helping people do that. That's what coaching is. Like, that is the skill of coaching, getting someone from knowing what to do to actually actioning it. And this is like, I always get this question of, don't you feel like you give away too much? Or like, aren't you worried that if you just give away information, then people won't sign up for coaching? I'm like, nobody's signing up for me. Sometimes they think they are, but realistically, no one is signing up for information. They're signing up for the application of that information into their life, and then the accountability, the support, the reassurance at the right time, the feeling supported, like knowing that someone's got your back, trusting in a coach. Like, that's what people sign up for. That's what people pay for. They don't pay for information. That's why I spend, hours and hours a week, and there is probably thousands of hours of free content from me. In fact, definitely thousands of hours of free content from me on the internet, but I still run very successful businesses from giving. Like, all of them are just built from giving.
Yeah. It's something as well that you see all of the, no matter what field, but coaching in general, those who give the most receive the most. And I'm sure you must be on the receiving end of that side of the cycle, if you know what I mean. All of that content that you give, obviously a lot of that I've trailed through to find some really cool questions for the podcast today. But is that something that you pride yourself on, giving away stuff for free to then almost like subconsciously receive it back in other ways that the world has to give you.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is reciprocation, right? Which is that people are more likely to, if I've given you something and I've given you value, you're more likely, when you are looking for a personal trainer or a coach or something, you're more likely to choose me. So there's that element. But then I also genuinely, my sole driver is to help as many people as possible. Now, some people need to pay for help, some people don't. So I get messages every day from people that are like, maybe not every day, but multiple times a week, from people that are like, hey, I listened to the podcast and I lost 10 pounds. And I never signed up. And people normally feel a bit sheepish. They're like, I know I never paid for coaching, but I listened to everything you said and I implemented it and I got these great results. And I'm like, that's amazing. You never needed coaching. Like, you just needed the information. You just needed shown where to put your efforts. Other people need a little bit more support than that. And like, those are the people that need coaching. And realistically, I only need 5% of people to actually need some coaching. And you can run brilliant businesses doing that.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. That really resonates with me when I started my own health journey. And the person that I watched and used their content was James Smith at the time, when he was stood there with balloons saying CFD and all of that. And I'd honestly never thought about it in that way. But I guess his intention was just to help somebody, whether they used this program, which I did eventually. I went into like James Smith Academy and like used him that way. But after I'd almost done all of the stuff that he'd given away for free on my own before hitting that plateau, which is really cool. But I guess that's something that you offer as information when you do your mentoring for PTs. Do you find it surprising that PTs don't know that giving away stuff for free is a really cool way of getting clients?
I think there's a scarcity element to it. So I think initially people are like, oh, well, I don't want to give away my secrets. I don't want to give too much and then people won't sign up. And there's that kind of mentality. But when you realize that that isn't what people are coming for, even like that isn't what coaching is, then you realize actually the people that can give the most will end up getting the most.
So when, like, you must have coached thousands of people, people who have tried everything and they need coaching, so they come to you. What are the most common mistakes that you see people make when it comes to fat loss or weight loss in general, that, like, honestly, on a weekly basis, you're like, this is the situation again, and this is what you offer, like, insight and advice on?
I think initially it's how you mentally approach dieting and all the connotations of dieting. So people normally approach dieting as, this is going to be restrictive. There's going to be an end point to my diet. I'm not going to enjoy it. I need to cut out things. I need the perfect, like, 6 weeks with nothing on, like those kind of expectations. And then I think not realizing that successful dieting means maintenance. So it's like, you're not making these changes for 6 weeks. Like, you need to make changes. You need to create a new normal, because if you just do 6 weeks and then you revert back to what you were doing, sure, you'll get the results in 6 weeks. And then you will slowly revert back to the body that you had based on the habits that you, or like the behaviors that you partake in, right? So like, your body is a byproduct of the actions that you take. And so if you then revert back to those actions, your body will revert back to what it was. So I think it's often having this like short-term mindset. And usually people massively overestimate what they can do in 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks, and massively underestimate what they can do in a year. So it's changing people's mindset about like getting excited about the long-term change. And really that takes the pressure off trying to do everything perfectly for the next 6 weeks. It's like, no, don't worry if you've got a wedding, a birthday, a trip away. These are changes that I'm going to help you make for life. And then I would say, secondly to that is the intention behind actions. So the same action can feel completely different to people depending on why they're doing it, right? So I don't do this, but I might go for a run every single morning. Now, if I was like, I get to go for a run every morning, I love it and it sets me up for my day, that feels very different than I force myself to go for a run in the morning so that I can earn my breakfast, because if I don't go for a run, I don't feel like I deserve it, right? One of them is restrictive, one of them is empowering. Same with like, I am choosing not to have that third slice of pizza because it doesn't align with my goals at the moment. That's empowering, right? Or I can't have that third slice of pizza. That feels restrictive. And if you approach these things in a restrictive mindset, you will only be able to have, like, you'll only have enough willpower to maintain restriction for a given period of time.
Yeah.
Whereas if you approach it as like, dieting is something I get to do because I love my body, I care about my health, like I want to feel my best, as opposed to it's a punishment for overeating, or sorry, dieting, exercise, like the mindset that you're approaching that, is it something that I get to do or that I have to do? And the same action looks very different depending on the intent.
One thing that I've noticed with like listening to podcasts, seeing content that you produce and working with people myself is that sometimes that mental negative dialogue doesn't just exist around that person's physical health. You're dealing with a client or person that actually just has unfortunately developed a very negative self-talk, and it's not just about the physical element of how to change a diet, it's around their work, around their lifestyle, it's around the peer group or the environment they're in. So how much of an effect, or how much do you look into that side of things with your clients as well?
I mean, broadly, mindset is everything. And
Yeah.
I'm so big into like life is what you make it. Like nothing is inherently like good or bad. And the whole like life is about 90% of what you make of a situation, as opposed to, what's the saying, 10% what happens to you, 90% how you respond to it, right?
100%.
And I think that's so true. Like you can choose to be positive, you can choose to let small insignificant things like being late ruin your whole day and make you grumpy all day, or you can be like, oh look, I was late, I wonder if I can find a positive in this. Like one thing I love doing is like gamifying life. So like, and it kind of makes things a little bit more exciting. So things like reframing, try to reframe everything, like sometimes to an annoying extent, right? So like, let's say, I don't know, the train is late, but you're like, oh great, the train is late, so that means I get to reply to all these emails before I even got there. Cool. Or like your friend can't show for dinner, so you're like, what, like how often do I actually just get to sit and have dinner on my own? Not very often. Like I'm going to make the most of this. Little things like that, which are like, these are negative things. I mean, even looking, often in hindsight it's easier, right? Like I didn't get that job at the shoe shop, but look, I have a career as a personal trainer now. Like you can always see that, like, oh, actually when one door shuts, another one opens. And I think realizing that there will always be more opportunities in life than time you have to actually do them is kind of exciting as well. And then it means that when opportunities don't work out for you, or when things don't happen for you, you're like, cool, there's, there are more opportunities than time. Thus, I will find another opportunity. There will be another opportunity. So I'm big on, and I think this is probably one of the most common things that my clients like say was like the biggest take home after they've worked with me, is just like, I'm so much more positive in every area of my life. Like, yeah, I got some fat loss results, but actually the biggest thing was I just think about things differently. Like not just I get to go and exercise, but it's like I apply it to everything. It's just like my family gets annoyed at me, but even like hearing that it rubs off on their kids, and their kids are like, no, mum, we don't have to do that. We get to do that. And like, I love hearing.
Unreal.
Yeah.
That's insane. I'm sat here feeling buoyed by listening to you reframe loads of stuff. I just felt good listening to that. But also, like, not only are you having a positive impact on your client that's obviously paid you money, you're then having a knock-on effect of positivity on a family as well. And that's like, I take my hat off to you. That's actually pretty insane when you think about it. My next question is, do you think that's something that's also common within the fitness industry then? Because like me and you relate to the fact that we probably started off looking after our physical health, and then quickly that turns into, where else can I look to improve? Is that something you've experienced?
Yeah. I mean, I think it all translates. Like once you start eating well and exercising, you feel better. And when you feel better, you show up better for everyone around you. Right. So it's like, people think that taking care of yourself seems selfish, or like, I work with a lot of mums, right? So a lot of the time it's, I'm so busy giving to everyone else that I don't really have time to exercise for 30 minutes 3 times a week. And I'm like, you're thinking about this the wrong way. Actually, when you take care of yourself, you can give more to others. When you exercise, you show up better for your family. You're in a better mood. You have more energy. Your health is better. Like I'm willing to bet I mean, we all used to be children, right? do you wish that your parents had exercised more when you were younger? I do. I wish that they'd like been like, no, sorry, I can't take you to swimming for the 10th time this week. Like, you're gonna have to go on your own, or you're gonna have to get the bus because mum has an exercise class. Like, that's important. And the like you being a role model is important as well. Like, thinking back and be like, actually, yeah, like 3 times a week, mum was always like, I'm going to do this. Or like, seeing your parents exercise and seeing them prioritize their health means that your children are more likely to do that too. So that's like the delayed reward of what impact am I having as a role model on my child. But then, and then the delayed reward of your health as you age, massive. But
Yep.
then there's the immediate reward of like how you feel, what your mood is like. Like, I would rather have, you know, less time with my mum, but she was in a better mood, than more time, but she felt like crap and energy was low and her mood was low, and maybe she's got poor body image and like, you know, all the things that come with like not taking care of yourself. I would rather have less time, you know, especially given it's what, 3 times 30 minutes a week or something, than all that time, but someone not being as good a mood. Like, quality over quantity, I guess.
Yeah, that's an amazing way of looking at it. You mentioned then obviously a lot of your clients are mums, which led me to the point of, at the start of the podcast, we discussed where a majority of your client base is, and you said 99% of your clientele are women. Women actually get it rougher than guys when it comes to weight loss, right, and fat loss. One of the more intricate struggles that women come up against is PCOS, which is a whole, we could probably do a whole topic or podcast on that subject. But in terms of weight loss, that has a massive bearing on women and like what results they can get and results they don't get. What are your biggest advisories to women when it comes to PCOS and weight loss?
Don't see it as a self-fulfilling prophecy,
Okay.
because every woman with PCOS is completely different. So it's not like you have this condition, thus X. So I have some clients who have PCOS who have no effect whatsoever on their weight loss. And actually, some clients who are
Wow.
almost help. And that's because with PCOS, you often have higher levels of testosterone, which means it's easier to build muscle. So, hey, like, you might be able to build muscle more. And what's quite interesting about that is that there is significantly higher rates of PCOS in elite level athletes, because there is this advantage to having slightly higher testosterone levels. So, you know, if you want to see a reframe there, not for
Reframe.
everyone, but like, there are potential positives as well. Again, not for everybody, and everybody's different. So with some women, and this is in extreme cases, you can have a reduction of up to 40% in your basal metabolic rate.
Wow.
And even with that, you're still not, you know, like, you have to diet on lower calories, which is tough. Essentially, you're a little bit more efficient. So if you're a small woman with PCOS that's impacting your basal metabolic rate, you will have to cut your calories quite low to lose body fat, and probably like look at the expenditure side of the equation as well. But I certainly wouldn't see it, and this goes for like menopause as well, which is a big topic of mine. It's not a self-fulfilling prophecy, and everyone responds very differently, and I wouldn't assume that you are the person that needs to drop their calories. Often it's more to do with like accurate tracking, or being patient, or being consistent, and having the right support, and knowing where to focus your efforts, and not, you know, following these diet trends online where it's like, if you have PCOS, you need to cut out this and this and only eat 3 almonds, and then you're like, I don't know why, but I'm just struggling to stick to this diet. And it's like, yeah, because it's a ridiculous diet that like nobody could stick to. So yeah, I think with that, like, it's a case by case basis. I am a little bit more open-minded and likely to drop calories sooner if I know someone has PCOS, but that's really one of the only changes I would make. A lot like with many conditions, like, everything else just kind of becomes more important. So another thing that can come alongside PCOS is insulin resistance. So things like resistance training, really important. Things like adding in a little bit of HIIT, really important. But would I be doing that with any client? Yes, because it's important for health, full stop. It's just even more important if you already have like a bit of underlying insulin resistance.
That's an amazing answer. Thank you, Emma. it leads me to my next question. This one's very like personal in some senses. So I spoke to my mum about you coming onto the podcast today. She's had a little look at who you are, and she wanted me. She's been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which has a negative effect on energy and mood and all those sorts of things. Now, for me, my mum knows this. This isn't something that's going to be totally new to her. My methodology around something like that is you have to catch a low hanging fruit first to then affect positively or take away less of effect of the diagnosis that you've been given. So we're talking good sleep, hydration, high protein, a little bit of resistance training where possible, getting in sunlight, vitamin D, a little bit of movement. Yeah, let's say that's low hanging fruit. Do you think that diagnosis is around? So obviously we've spoken about PCOS. I've spoken about mum's diagnosis of fibromyalgia, and the menopause is sometimes in the mainstream made out to be something that is too much of a negative. Then like it's almost a diagnosis that puts a negative frame on people. We talk about reframing already, but if you actually look at that low hanging fruit, can it have more of an impact on women than what is actually made out?
So do I think diagnoses are useful? In some cases, yes, but I kind of understand that in some cases, no. So for example, this is a completely different example, but I
Yeah.
have ADHD and dyslexia. A lot of people, and it depends if you basically, it depends if you have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. So for me, I'm like, that's not going to stop me doing anything. But actually, the diagnosis was useful because it helped me get to know myself a little bit better. So I wasn't like, I used to think I was a bit of an idiot because I barely can finish a book. Like, I think in my whole life, I've finished maybe 3 books and they were pretty short ones. And I just have always really struggled to read. And I really struggle with like spelling and things like that. And understanding that, hey, that's just part of who you are, and not kind of beating yourself up about it or not thinking, oh, I'm stupid because of that. Fine. But if I was then like, well, there's no point even trying reading, or like, for example, now I read a ton of books on Audible, right? Or I listen to them if you don't want to say read, whatever. But I found a way around that. And same with ADHD. I'm like, I understand that actually, some advice for some people doesn't really work for me because that's not how my brain works. And I'm a little bit more open-minded to, hey, I might work better in this way. But I'm certainly not like, I'm going to work less because of this, or I can't do this because of that.
Yeah.
So it depends on your mindset around the diagnosis. So if you were diagnosed with fibro, you might be like, right, okay, so I am going to struggle with that volume of training. How can I split up my training so that I can manage my fatigue levels in a way that doesn't cause like a flare up, or doesn't cause me to like overtrain and not recover from that, or mean
Yeah.
that I do a workout and then I'm in bed for 3 days? Like, how can I manage this better? So if you're seeing a diagnosis as, here's a way to get to know myself better and get to deal with like what I'm experiencing better, I think it's really, really useful, and it gives you a bit of understanding around it. If you see it as, oh, I've got this, thus I can't do anything, that's not helpful, right? And again, growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Growth mindset would be like, for example, for me, it might be like, okay, you're not very good at reading, but you can still get better. Like, you might not ever be the best reader in the world, but you can still be better than you are.
Yeah, incredible. And I think like, mum, I hope you're listening to this. And going back to what I said though, and this, so I've asked my clients as well on my page for questions for you, and one of them has sent in a question of, do you think that women's health is actually taken serious enough in the mainstream media type area? I think like I'm gonna chip in on that question myself before you do. In general, I don't believe anybody's health is taken seriously enough by the mainstream media in terms of the easy route into getting healthier that you can have. Do you like, would you agree with that statement?
I think so, yeah. I think one of my big bugbears is when people say they don't have time to exercise. And I
Yeah, yeah.
strongly believe you don't have time not to exercise. Like, it is the best thing that you can do for your health. So when people are like, oh yeah, I would, but I can't fit it in anymore, I'm like, no. It should be a priority for everyone. It doesn't matter if you've got a fat loss goal or not. Like, everybody should be exercising. And I'm not saying everybody needs to go to the gym 5 times a week or whatever. Everybody needs to do 3 times about 30 minutes of exercise, something they enjoy. Like, they need to do something, because otherwise they will regret it as they age. Like, it is fundamentally the most important thing for health, and you cannot be healthy if you don't exercise in some way. And I think that's not taken seriously enough. It's almost like it's an optional choice. And I know that like everything is a choice. I'm not saying we should force people, but I just don't think that it's taken seriously enough.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And that leads me to revert back to a post I've seen you answer. Actually, one of your followers asked you what your fitness goals were for 2023. And your response was, well, I don't have anything specific, or you're not exercising for anything specific apart from feeling good, which realistically is the number one positive from exercising, right? That little hit of feeling good. I just a little story. I had my PT session not yesterday, the day before, and did this ridiculously hard finisher. It ruined me, but we recorded me do a set because it was a lifting a sandbag onto my shoulder, which I just wanted to see that my form was good doing it. And at the end of the set, I just had this massive grin on my face, which was such a visible reminder to me that exercising has such an amazing effect on you. And when you see it, like, you know it, like you read it, you see it on people's posts, but when you can see that grin on your face afterwards, you just go, that's why I'm doing this.
Yeah, but to caveat that, not everybody loves exercise.
Okay, carry on. So how do you enjoy the process of exercise?
And well, this is what I think we need to be realistic about. Like, we surround ourselves with the fitness industry, and like, I love exercise. Most of my mates do. Well, actually, that's not totally true, but anyway, any of my fitness industry mates do. And it's very easy to think, why would nobody else want to do this? I feel amazing after it. And not realize that actually some people don't like exercise. However, does that mean they won't feel better afterwards? No. Like, I think everybody feels the benefit in terms of mood, energy, productivity, how they show up, their health. Like, these things are universal, but the enjoyment of exercise, I don't think is. And there are certain things you can do, like find exercise that you do enjoy or at least don't hate.
Yeah.
You know, if you hate the gym environment, maybe you can exercise outside. If you prefer a class, you could do a class. Like, you can find stuff that is more tolerable or enjoyable for you. But we have to be realistic as well, that like some people just don't love it, and that is also fine. But one point that I think is really important to make is that a lot of the time people are exercising for an outcome goal, right? So maybe it's to look a certain way, to build muscle, to lose fat. Now, if you want to build muscle or lose fat, and I mean especially build muscle, you're talking about delayed gratification here. Like, you go into the gym and you do a hard workout, you will look exactly the same when you walk out. You won't have more muscle, you won't have lost fat. Like, you've got to do that consistently over time to get the result. That's hard for people. It's hard to delay gratification. It's hard to put the effort in now and wait for the reward later. And what I want people to be aware of is that there is an immediate reward, but we just don't really talk about it that much. And the immediate reward is how productive you are that day, your energy, your mood, your like everything about you like is better if you have exercised. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at with that response, is like, I have a very busy life. I have a very busy job. Like, I absolutely love it. But I know that if I want to show up at my best for all the calls I do in the day, for the podcast, for the live, for all of my clients, for check-ins, and if I want to do that, I need to take care of myself first. That's why I go and exercise in the morning first. My primary drive to exercise now is so I show up at my best, as opposed to look a certain way, build a certain amount of muscle, anything like that. Like, and I get that as an immediate reward, because I know on the days that I exercise, I feel better.
Amazing. So on the flip side then, would I get a different version of Emma today if you were to have not exercised?
Yeah. And I don't know if you would notice it necessarily. I would notice it in myself, but even just a bit like, I guess the best way is like less energy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it's something, like you say, delayed gratification and stuff. But again, I'm learning something. I'm taking that on board. It is something that actually you don't hear spoken about enough. Like, it's not spoken about enough, that instant instant reward of feeling amazing going into your day, how productive you're going to be, whether you've got kids, how you show up for them, how you show up to your job, like, and just an all-round aura. My final question from my clients is based around period cravings when dieting. So obviously, without being restrictive is the best way of dealing with that, and almost it's not having a week off, if you like, but being less harsh on yourself would be my point to my clients when it comes to that. What about yourself? What do you offer your clients when it comes to those sugar cravings, fat cravings, nice food cravings that it may be when it comes to being on your period and having those cravings?
So there's two approaches I like to take. One, I agree with yours, like, hey, can we bring your calories up to maintenance for a few days and just allow you to eat a little bit more when you're craving a little bit more? Fine. The second, and actually is the one that I use myself, and most clients honestly resonate with more. Let's see if people listening do. But if you're the kind of person like me who craves like a couple of days before their period, but anything that, like, if I'm craving chocolate and I'm like, oh, I'll just bring my calories up to maintenance and I'll have a bit of chocolate, that does nothing for me because I will crave no matter what I have, right? So
Yeah.
the point is the craving is not going anywhere. So what I have to change is like my mindset around that a little bit. So I'm like, okay, actually, I know that even if I have this chocolate, I'm still going to crave it. So then I just choose not to. Like, and it's usually for like 3 or 4 days. I'm like, if I still want it in 3 or 4 days, I'll have it. But I kind of know that I don't trust my instincts quite so much because for me, my mood is much lower, my body image is much lower, my motivation is significantly lower, my cravings are higher, like I have period pains, like, it's not a great time of the month. So I don't trust the decisions I would make during those couple of days. And I mean, to the extent that, like, I used to be like, I want to quit my job. I want to go. And I'd always just say to myself, if you still want to do that next week, when your period starts, then you can, right? So I'm not like restricting myself. I'm not being like, you can't have chocolate. It's like, do you think that maybe you'd be in a better frame of mind to decide whether you do or don't want to make these, especially like the bigger life decisions,
Yeah.
this time? So I just delay the decision. And during that time, I'm actually tend to be more like disciplined with myself because I don't think I'll make a good decision, right? I do the same in the evening. So I have a rule where you can use whatever time you want, right? But for me, it's like the 8 p.m. rule. I never make decisions after 8 p.m. because you always make poor decisions, right? If you think about when you make your worst decisions, like, when are you going to text your ex? It's not going to be at 8 in the morning. It's going to be at 8 at night, right? Or later than 8 at night. When are you going to buy crap that you don't need on the internet? You never wake up in the morning and think, oh, I'll just scroll on Amazon and see what I've got. No, you don't. So, if you're shopping late at night, leave it in your basket, on the Amazon basket, and then in the morning you can go back and decide if you actually want it or not. When are you most likely to overeat? At night, right? You make your poorest decisions later in the day, probably because of decision fatigue and probably because you're sitting around maybe a little bit bored, right?
Yeah.
So if you just know, hey, I don't make good decisions later in the day, if I still want to eat that bag of Doritos, text my ex and buy all this crap on Amazon, I'll do it in the morning. I'm not like saying I can't do it. I'm just saying I don't think I make the best decisions at this time. I'll delay that decision.
I love that. I literally love that. I like it. Every point you make, it resonates with me, and I'm sure it will with the listeners as well. Emma, I saw a quote of yours which I really liked, which links to physical and like mindset health. I think is a good way of putting it. And it said, "Motivation will change your day. Habits will change your life." So my question to you is: obviously, we've spoken about exercise. What other habits does Emma Gordon have in her day-to-day life that make her feel good?
Good question. I think generally, like, getting out for a walk every day, the basic stuff, right? I don't do anything massively extreme. One thing I do that's maybe a little bit different is a bit of a morning routine. So I like to, and I'm just looking at my pull-up bar now, but like, I'll get up and I'll do some pull-ups and I'll do some push-ups.
Wow.
I make my cup of tea in the morning. Like, it doesn't take any extra effort, but it's just like a little extra thing. And then I call it like a golden hour in the morning that I just do my own stuff. So I guess this kind of relates back to the exercise point. So my day will start at like 5:30. I'll get up, do a couple of pull-ups, a couple of push-ups, get a cup of coffee, and I'll sit down and I'll do like an hour-ish of
Yeah.
my own work. And then I'll go to the gym. and then I'll come back and I normally have colds from 9 a.m. But by 9 a.m., I've taken care of myself.
Yeah.
Like I've done everything I need to do for me. So now I can give to others. And I show up much better giving to others because I took care of myself first. And I found that like I used to train later in the day and I quite enjoyed it, but like I found that it would either be really rushed because I'd be like, there's so much other stuff I need to be doing, or before I'd, done all the stuff I needed to do for myself, I didn't feel like quite as much like I could give as much, basically.
So would you say, like, I love asking the question as well, like, what are your non-negotiables? Something that you do, let's say 5 minimum days of the week. Are those the things that you do every day without fail? Or is there a day where you'll veer away and maybe a little bit more relaxed?
I would say I do those like every single day, but I also don't stress if I don't. So like if I was unwell or it was Christmas or I was, like I travel quite a lot, like there
Yeah.
there will be times where I can't. But realistically, most days you can. And so that was kind of the point of like the quote a little bit, is that what you do on average over time will dictate your outcome. It's not being perfect, it's not being perfect when you're motivated that gets you results. And actually, this is something I spoke about the other day, but it's your bad days that ruin
Yeah.
your progress, not your good. Like your bad days will have a bigger impact on your outcome than your good days. So instead of focusing on making your good days absolutely perfect, focusing on making your bad days less bad. And I think a good example of this is having a calorie target, and as soon as you go over it, thinking you've ruined everything. When realistically, if you go over your calorie target by a little bit, you're still in a deficit and you've still lost body fat that day. So you've certainly not ruined everything. If you go over by a little bit more, maybe you're at maintenance, right? Which means, sure, you didn't lose fat, but you also didn't gain anything.
Yeah.
But what normally happens is, oh, I went 2 calories over my 1600 calorie target, ruined everything, may as well eat everything. And that is what ruins your progress. Or, I don't know, maybe you didn't get a workout in on Monday and you're like, I'll just wait till next Monday to start. Doesn't make any sense, right? And it's interesting because you don't do that in other areas of your life. You don't drop 10 pounds and then think, do you know what? I'm just going to empty out my whole bank balance because what's the point now? But you
Yeah.
would with your diet, you'd be like, oh, I had one cookie at lunchtime. Oh, well, the whole diet's ruined today. No, it's not. And I think reminding yourself it's averages over time that get results, then you get less stressed about like little imperfections, which are just absolutely inevitable.
That resonates with me. As I did a little post today. Basically, I was in a hotel last night, so I had buffet breakfast this morning. Like, an older Harry's mindset would have been like, don't enjoy the buffet. Whereas it's now, well, enjoy the buffet, but later on, mate, you're not eating much whatsoever. You're having a salad for tea or whatever. And I find, like, what I find interesting is going back to your little habits is genuinely, no matter what field you speak to people in terms of like mindset coaching, sleep coaching, fat loss coaching, a lot of the fundamentals remain the same, which obviously leads you to think that, oh, it's easy, but it's not easy, because there's a lot of factors that come around for individuals. And obviously having a fixed mindset would be maybe their biggest hurdle. But also, it is important to remind people, I think, that these changes that you can make in these habits, which we've spoken about yours, can be small, but yet have such a big impact on you, and give them time can have a massive impact on you as a person overall, like make you a little bit happier, improve your mood, open your fixed mindset to be more of a growth mindset, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think a lot of these things aren't easy, but they're simple.
Yeah.
Like a lot of, it's not like diet doesn't have to be complicated, exercise doesn't have to be complicated, going for a walk every day doesn't have to be complicated. But that doesn't mean it's easy. And I think people get their back up sometimes with, hey, you just need to create a deficit. And they're always like, well, it's not that easy. I'm not saying that's easy. Like, it isn't actually easy over a long period of time to create a deficit. That's why so many people struggle with weight loss. That's why I have a job, right? It's not easy, but it is simple. You don't need to overcomplicate it because that only makes it harder. And then the other point is that a lot of these things are also easy, right? But it's the consistency that's hard. So like having a day, I don't know, like having a day where you have like a pretty standard breakfast, lunch, dinner, all has protein in it, all has fruit and veg in it, and you have a nice snack that you enjoy, and then you get out for a walk and you hit your 10,000 steps and you go to the gym. That's not that hard, but consistently doing that over time, that's what's hard. That's what people struggle with. Having one day where they're pretty good, not hard. Doing that, even when they don't want to do it, and organizing their, like balancing that with their life, that's hard.
For sure, for sure. That leads me on to another question, and it is always different for different people how they react to. I'm going to use the terminology, the scales, and if you listen to like professionals with much greater like reach than me, including yourself, you do see that there are differences of opinions. So you'll see some coaches like say to jump on every day just so you can monitor your differences with water weight, how your body fluctuates on a daily basis. Some people say weekly, some people say monthly. What would you say to people who do get affected by jumping on the scales and not seeing too much of a change?
Yeah, this is hard. So weighing yourself monthly, unless it is the same time of the month, is a stupid thing to do because there's so many things that can impact your weight, and it might say that you've gained 3 pounds when actually you've lost fat, right? And you wouldn't know that because you don't have enough data. So the scales are not an accurate representation of fat loss, but they become even less accurate if you have less data points. So that's where doing something like weighing yourself first thing every morning and seeing the fluctuations. This is interesting because most of my clients who I have do that, and I don't have everybody weigh, but the vast majority will weigh themselves every single morning at the same time every day, and it improves their relationship with the scales.
Yep.
And it does that because they now understand that weight fluctuates all the time, even when they stick perfectly to their diet. So it can't possibly be a change in body composition. It's just water retention. Or in fact, I actually, if a client comes to me and is like, oh my God, I put on 3 pounds since yesterday, I'm like, okay, I'm not worried in the slightest because there's no way that you've put on 3 pounds of fat overnight. If they came to me and said, over the last month, I've put on 3 pounds, I'd be like, that very much could be fat, right? Over time, that absolutely could be. So like short-term drastic fluctuations cannot be a change in body fat. It's almost impossible to put on 3 pounds of fat overnight. When you do the maths on that, it's like you would have to eat 10,000 extra calories over and above your maintenance calories. So if you've even vaguely stuck to your diet, there's no way that that could happen. And when you add into that how inefficient your body is, like you probably have to eat closer to 15,000 calories. Anyway, besides the point, like I think actually scales are a good measure of fat loss over time. And when I say over time, I'm talking like months, not days to weeks. It's like multiple weeks to months. So I get people to weigh every day, but then I take the lowest weight from the week and I compare that week on week. And then I see a trend. Is that trending down? Great. If fat loss is your goal, that's what we want. Is that trending up? If fat loss isn't your goal, that isn't what we want. And, like maintenance would be in the middle somewhere. But even at maintenance, you will see weight fluctuations. Like you cannot avoid it. It's just natural. It's just what happens. And I think if you're a woman, like doing things like tracking your cycle alongside that is very helpful because we've already spoken about how mood is impacted and motivation levels are impacted and cravings are impacted. Now, add into that mix, you also stand on the scales, and because of fluctuating hormones, you're retaining more water and the scales have gone up 3 pounds. So now you have low mood, poor body image, whatever, low motivation levels,
Yeah.
and scales have gone up. That is the perfect storm to give up on your diet if you don't understand why it's going up. However, if you tracked your cycle and you tracked your weight, you could be like, oh, this happens every single month. And then I know that in about a week, it tends to drop again. And you can rationalize it a little bit more.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, absolutely amazing. One of the like you spoke about obviously different type of clientele there, people that obviously want to gain a little bit of weight for gaining for muscle purposes, and obviously the people that want to drop body fat. There's almost a little bit of like a in-betweeny there of people that want to drop body fat whilst gaining muscle. And there's almost like a bit of a, not fitness industry myth, but it's a bit of a myth that says that people can't put on muscle when they're losing body fat. They can't do both at the same time. Obviously they can, but if you was to say 3 quick tips for somebody wanting to do that that isn't sure or don't think that it's possible, what would they be, Emma?
So the truth is, it's less or more like less or more or less likely
There you go.
that that will happen in certain situations. So if you're quite new to resistance training and you have a lot of body fat, you can absolutely lose fat and build muscle at the same
Yeah.
time. If you don't have much fat left to lose, it's very unlikely that you will be able to build muscle and lose fat at the same time. Like, for example, if you're going to the extreme of like bodybuilder type level, like actually at that extreme, you will always almost always lose muscle if you continue to diet
Yeah.
because there's just not enough energy there. So it does depend, and I think that myth sticks around because it's not quite that simple.
Yeah.
For the vast majority of people who want to lose fat, like I would always be training them to build muscle anyway. Like muscle is the most important thing for health. So you should always be lifting to build muscle. You should always be eating enough protein. Like if you want to maximize fat loss and building muscle at the same time, my tips would be don't be in too big of a deficit. Prioritize your sleep. Make sure you're hitting your protein target and resistance train, but don't overtrain, right? So like maybe 4 to 5 sessions a week max for resistance training, because the problem with overtraining, under recovery, already being in a deficit means that you're much less likely to be able to build muscle or even maintain muscle while you're dieting at the same time.
Amazing stuff. Yeah, it is interesting though, isn't it? Because obviously there are all these different caveats of different clientele that you can come up with. Some people are obviously, as you say, at one end of the scale, and it's easier for them to lose body fat, which like I guess leads me on to my next point, because it was the same for me, and it's an interesting point, and I'm sure you come up against it a lot as well, is when you are on that body fat trail, you can do, especially I was heavy lad. I was 135, had a lot of weight to lose. And it was at the point where it didn't matter really how many mistakes I made, as long as 5 out of 7 of those days were decent. And then the other two, like maybe it led to a night out and then a McDonald's at the end of the night. But normally, 9 times out of 10, when it came to reviewing, I'd lost the weight that I was after. Whether I was building up muscle at the time, who knows? Then it came to that point, sticking point, which people also have problems with. That is normally 9 times out of 10 due to probably not being as accurate with calories in terms of a deficit or not, right? But I've seen you say, if you're not losing weight and you don't want to track calories, which is aimed at people who probably have a little bit of a mindset problem around being accurate with calories and not really wanting to do it, which is absolutely fine, of course, eat more. And when I read that post, it was like, eat more. And then obviously I read what you were saying about satiating foods and all that sort of stuff. I think I pronounced that correctly. And I was
Satiate.
like, yeah, there you go. Thank you. So explain that a little bit more. And obviously, in terms of like the calorie deficit mindset and like not movements, it's not a movement, but advice, that's different, isn't it? Tell people to eat more to lose weight. So if like people like, let's say me 5 years ago would have read that post and gone, well, that's not going to work. How would you explain it better to a Harry 5 years ago?
You're still creating a deficit, right? So if you want to lose fat, you have to create a deficit. Where people get confused is if you want to create a deficit, you do not have to track calories, right? And that post was about choosing the foods that you eat, because actually, if you eat high volume, high protein foods, the likelihood is you will create a deficit without ever having to track your calories. And actually, if you just keep it mega simple and you're like, I'm going to reduce my snacking, so I'm going to have 3 meals a day and one snack. And then these meals are going to be built around protein and they're all going to have at least 2 servings of fruit and veg with them. You'll start losing weight anyway. Like you
Yeah.
will create deficit by doing that. But the point is, and where I think people get their back up a little bit, is like, oh, what? So you're saying calorie deficit doesn't matter? No. Like there are so many ways to create a calorie deficit without tracking calories. You absolutely don't need to track them. Like, even if you think of how long have we had MyFitnessPal? What, 5 years, 10
Yeah.
years? People were losing weight before that. Shocking, I know, right? But they created a deficit a different way. And I kind of push back against like the default always being let's track calories, because some people don't want to do that. Some people don't need to do that. For example, I got absolutely shredded. I used to do fitness modeling back in the day, right? I never tracked my calories because I found it boring as hell.
Wow.
An ADHD thing, right? But I was just like, I'll just eat consistently very similar meals. And if I find that I'm not losing weight, I'll just tweak the meal to know that it's lower calorie, or I'll make it smaller, and thus I will continue to lose, right? It's not rocket science. Like, you can make these adjustments without having to track everything.
Amazing. I've got two more really quick questions before we wrap up the podcast, Emma. First question: what is on the agenda for you over 2023? What are your goals? Obviously, you don't have any big fitness goals as such, but what is on the top of your mind for 2023?
So I want to build all my businesses. I have numerous businesses. One thing that I'm really loving at the moment is mentoring other coaches. So I have about 30 coaches that I mentor now to help them build their businesses and impact more people. So I'm loving that, and I think that will be a big growth thing for 2023. I've just taken on an operations manager who's going to help me run everything. At the moment, I'm a bit like pulled in 50 different directions, but she's going to make sure it's much more smooth so that I'm, again, showing up at my best for the high level tasks. So yeah, I'm excited about that. I'm excited about helping more people ditch yo-yo dieting, and a little bit more traveling for myself, I think.
Incredible. And then final question: we've spoke about mindset, we spoke about reframing, we've spoken about dieting, health as well. But in all of those, what is the best bit of advice you've ever been given that you could pass on to others?
What the best bit of advice? I think just take the pressure off and like enjoy the journey. And you, like, as cheesy as this is, like, you get one life, right? You don't need to be doing miserable diets. You don't need to be forcing yourself to do stuff. You don't need to do it by next week. Like, take the pressure off the time restraint. And coming back to that quote about like, most people will overestimate what they can do in 8 weeks and underestimate what they can achieve in a year. So get used to like working hard, embrace working hard. I fully believe that I love hard work now because I know what comes from it. And there is very little in life that is worth having that doesn't require hard work. So now when something's hard, I'm like, yeah, I'm excited for that. And when something's easy, I'm like, I'm not interested. If it's easy, I don't really care. If it's hard, I'm like, oh, I'll either learn something or I'll get a hell of a lot from this.
Insane. I absolutely love that. Emma, where can people come and find you if they would like to find out more about you and your coaching and your mentoring business?
So for coaching, it's esgfitness.co.uk or at esgfitness. And for mentoring, it's afmentors.com or at afmentors.
I would fully advise everybody to go over and follow you for your content. It is amazing. Today has been episode 74 of the Grassroots Guy podcast with me, your host, Harry Purdy, and today's guest, Emma Storey Gordon. It's been an absolute pleasure to have Emma on the show with all of the value she has offered. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please pop over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and drop this show a 5-star review. It does go a long, long way to helping the show. I will catch you here with a new episode every Friday. Take care.